Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. What an epic day, and thanks, James and Owen, for such a magnificent job as always. I actually was just talking backstage to James. I remember when he first came to me with his idea for sales confidence when he was still back working at LinkedIn back all that time ago, and look at what he's done since. Really quite impressive stuff. And one of the things that has always set James apart for me is his growth mindset, his willingness to learn from those around him. And that's what we're going to focus on now, growth mindset, how to get the best out of yourself, and in particular by choosing the right coach or mentor. But before we get started, I don't know how many of you are active on the chat today. I've been in and out of it, watching people comment. But what I'd love to get a feel for here is who's got a coach or a mentor of their own. Please just get on the chat and let me know if you do or not. Maybe you've got a coach. Maybe you've got, let me open the chat up myself. Here we go. Maybe you've got a coach. Maybe you've got a formal mentor. Maybe you've got both. Maybe you're actively planning to have a coach or mentor. You think it's a good idea, but you haven't got round to organising it yet. Owen says, I've got an amazing coach and a separate mentor. Exactly the right thing to do. Ken, yes. Let us know if you didn't think about it yet, or even if you think it's a stupid idea and you don't plan to have a coach or a mentor. Dan hasn't got one. Tell us why, Dan. Is it something that you've thought about before? Is it just what's put you off? Is there a reason for not doing that? Yeah, Martin, best decision I ever made. Yeah, Ken, same for me as well. I've been with the same coach for about 3 years, exactly the same. Will's is not formally, just a few people I lean on for advice and guidance. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And there's some people actually that I know Will, I know Martin. There's some people going through the comments there who I know really well to be exceptional. And yet not everybody's got a coach or a mentor. Harry says, I've identified that I need one. And there's this wonderful paradox at the heart of coaching and mentoring inside SaaS businesses, which I think is really worth highlighting. And this is that it's really rare to talk to anyone in the SaaS space and ask them about coaching and mentoring, and for them to say that they don't think it's a good idea. Yeah, there always seems to be this idea lurking somewhere in our SaaS psyche that somehow you need to know it all. You need to be able to do anything and everything yourself. And if you can't do that, it's a sign of weakness. And the reality is that this couldn't be further from the truth, because the truth is great executives have a network, a bit like Will said on the chat, that great executives have a network of people around them to help them to succeed. Who here recognizes this guy? Hi, Shams, you're my coach. Shams is probably the greatest sales director that ever worked for me. So go and check out his business, Talent to Africa. Who recognizes this guy on the screen? Stick it in the chat if you know who this is. Anyone? I'm just going to tell you, I think. This is Bill Campbell, and he's the coach behind the success of a whole bunch of exceptional people, including Steve Jobs, Sheryl Sandberg, Ben Horowitz. In order for them to be as successful as they are or were, they built a network of people to support and help them to manage their success as they grow. And incidentally, if you haven't read his book, The $1 Trillion Coach, I highly recommend it if you get a chance. So if you didn't recognize him, then you're going to struggle to recognize this guy. But does anyone know who this is? I'll give you a clue. He coaches one of the most famous sports managers in the world. I'm going to come back to him later, but whack it on the chat and I'll try and keep an eye out if you think you know who this is. By the way, I had to image search him. I didn't know what he looked like, so I'd be impressed if you do. So we're going to go through 4 things. So the first is the difference between a coach and a mentor. I've seen both of those words already go through the chat. We're going to talk about how to choose a coach or a mentor. We're going to talk about how to sell internally that a coach or mentor is a good idea. Often you have to persuade your boss to do this. And finally, we're going to look at the impact that your coach or mentor is having. How do you measure that? And first of all, let's just reflect on the difference between the two. Abbas says Revenue Collective is his coach. Well, absolutely, there's a fantastic mentoring scheme that runs through the Revenue Collective, now Pavilion, of course. So at the heart of the coach's vocation is simply the requirement to get the best out of you, to work with you in such a way that all of your natural brilliance, your qualities, your character come out in the tasks to which you've been applying yourself. Think of a coach as your champion, your advocate, or a discerning listener. A mentor is different. A mentor is not there to get the best out of you. A mentor is there to share their experiences, to talk through with you the specific scenarios that you may be involved in, to enable you to make the best decisions and to learn from the mistakes of others. Think of a mentor as an experienced and trusted advisor, someone who's been there and done it before you. Let's just pause for a moment. Those of you who said on here that you have a coach, so who was that? Ken, Martin, who else? Jack, and if you didn't know, Owen, anyone else who didn't chip in, where did you find them? Was it a recommendation? Did you see it on LinkedIn, someone that was sharing lots of stuff about themselves? Was it did your company supply you with someone? A bunch of research, chats with potentials, referrals? Let us know where they came from. A lot of people really struggle to figure out where on earth am I going to even go in the first place to get the right person. While you're doing that, if you're doing that, let's dig in on choosing a coach. And there are 3 things that you want. James Ski, yeah, the Uber networker, Mr. Ski, good man. So there are 3 things that you want to consider when you're looking for a coach. I hope, Ken, you're not saying that James is your coach. That sounds very scary. There are 3 things that you want to consider when you're looking for a coach. So let's go through them. And the first of these is self-development. How can I demonstrably improve at the things that I'm doing? And the second, Martin says, through a load of research recommendations. Yeah, exactly. The second is the development of others. How can I draw the best out of my team? And if you're running a relatively large team, if you're a revenue leader, you may have 5 or 6 managers that report to you. So you're a manager of managers, and you need to make sure you get the best out of those people. The third is that you're going through a specific series of events that you need coaching through. For example, you're contributing to a serious fundraise for the first time and you need someone to walk you through this new experience. Now, you can imagine that the way you select a coach with those 3 categories in mind will be very different. In particular, that third category is going to be very different to the first 2. And we're going to look at each of these 3 areas in turn, starting with self-development. So there will be areas that you index highly for, and there will be areas where you index low. We can't all be good at everything. So the choice that you need to make is, should I be focusing on the areas where I already index highly, or should I be focused on the areas where I index low? Logic often dictates that in areas where we're weaker, we want to focus on those, but I'm not convinced that that is always the right option. Let's start with the areas where we're weak. And they can be divided into 2 categories. So the first of those is stuff that I need to do well, skills that I just need to acquire. I might never be the best in the world at them, but I absolutely do need to be able to do them. An example might be, maybe you struggle with presenting to a board, but if you really want to be a CRO, you're going to have to do that. So you may need to work through your presentation skills, even if you're never going to be the world's greatest presenter. And the second category is stuff that you're not good at and you really don't need to be good at. And this is where you hire people around you who can index better than you in those areas. Let's take empathy as an example. Of course, empathy is a good thing. I don't suggest you don't work on empathy, but it may well be that you can hire people who are better able to get an intuitive sense of what's happening than you can. And you should rely on those people rather than work incredibly hard to try and get half good at something. After all, if you spend 6 months getting from a 1 out of 5 to a 2 out of 5, guess what? You still suck. Whereas maybe you can hire someone who's already a 4 out of 5. So decide, should I be working with a coach on my weak points? Yes or no? And then after the stuff that you suck at, which you can see I've put here on the right-hand side, there's this other stuff on the left, things you are already good at. And generally, that's where I would place the cursor when thinking about engaging with a coach. And then the second category is the development of others. And in order to develop others, as you become a manager and, as we said, a manager of managers, you will need to know how to be a coach yourself, because you're now in a position where you are responsible for identifying and drawing the best out of your team. And that's not easy to do. So it might be that you need to focus with your own coach on developing your coaching skills with the goal of getting the best out of your management team and your wider team. So what I find to be really important here is this question: what kind of leader am I? Please don't answer that in the chat, but maybe go away and reflect on that. What kind of leader am I? Maybe you're a very directive leader, or you could be the leader that tends to give a sense of perspective to your team but doesn't spend a great deal of time on specific coaching. Maybe you're already an excellent coach. We could argue all day about whether these are good things or bad things, but my personal perspective is that in order to succeed, the key is to identify what kind of leader we are, and then ensure that we use that insight to then go about getting the best coach to suit our style. And then there's a third area, and that is a specific series of events, because coaches are not just about long-term development. They can be there also to give you a sounding board for delivering well in the moment too. Let's look at an example. Maybe you're doing a funding round for the first time, or perhaps you need to land a particular message at the company's end of year town hall when everybody's there. I'm sure you can think of a bunch of others where there will be a need for you to have that respected, trusted sounding board, that person who already has all the frameworks that can be applied to your thinking to help you deliver the best possible version of yourself, and therefore the best possible version of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Coaches can be fantastic for that. You can run through presentations with your coach. You can run through how you intend to approach a subject. You can run through how you intend to manage a one-to-one on a particularly sensitive subject. All of these are prime ground for a great coach to really help you deliver to the best of your ability. But crucially, these are, and here's the difference, these generally are not long-term outputs. They may give you skills for the long term, but these are about helping you with short-term stuff in the moment. So now let's stop talking about coaching for a moment and talk about mentoring, because it's very different. If you've been hired well into your job, then you should be capable of doing that for the next 2 years. But if you intend on going further than 2 years in one role, then the majority of us will begin to encounter things for the first time. And that's where mentors come in. So my advice when hiring a mentor is that you're looking for people here that are 2 years further on than you are. When hiring a mentor, your job is then to understand what are the errors that they made. Find out, ask them, what are the frameworks they found most impactful as they grew? And then third, ask them about the things they wish they'd done better the first time around. What would they do differently? And I recommend that you systematically meet with as many potential mentors as you possibly can. Remember, always looking for people that are 2 years further on in the journey than you are. And I've identified 4 categories that you'll need to consider when you look 2 years into the future. What things are going to happen that you haven't experienced before? I'm sure if you picture your revenue in 2 years' time, then you picture the number of people in your team in 2 years' time, and the departments and the territories, you will imagine all sorts of scenarios that you didn't do yet. And what skills will you need to acquire? And what specialist sector experience do you need to have in the category or the vertical that you're in? And finally, when you're looking for a mentor, find out if they are what I would call a seasoned traveler, by which I mean, have they got direct experience of the journey that you're on? Do they know how to do that? I was talking to someone this morning, we were sharing how often we'd been in Manchester airport, and we knew the shortcuts. We knew how to get from A to B really quickly. We knew how to arrive last at the airport and still make the plane. That's the kind of thing you're figuratively looking for. So let's start with the stuff that you haven't experienced before. Think about the topics that you feel that you're going to need to be mentored through. Project 2 years ahead and think about the challenges. So if you're running at 5 mil ARR right now, in 2 years' time, you're probably going to be running somewhere between 10 and 12, maybe even 15 million of ARR. That's heading towards Series C. Now, what things do you think are going to be happening at that point that you haven't experienced before? Probably a lot. So find someone who has. Second, what are the specific skills that you might need to acquire? So, for example, perhaps you have to, I don't know, rebuild your pricing model, and you've never built a pricing model before. So it could be useful to have a mentor who's done that. Or you're looking for someone who's got the experience of managing the same team size that you're going to be managing. Or they've worked in SaaS, maybe not in your segment, but they've grown a business with roughly the same price points, roughly the same deal values, roughly the same team sizes as you. The key here is that they have the management experience you're looking for. Or third, it may be that they've got a specialism in your vertical. They know about retail, for example, or they know about facilities management, for example. It's invaluable to have a mentor for whom your market is not their first rodeo, and they know what you mean when you dive into all sorts of detail, the specificities of your sector. And finally, you may want someone who's got what I call the travel experience. They've been on the journey that you're about to embark on. So for example, they might have launched a new territory somewhere overseas, something you're about to do, or they went on the journey from 10 to $20 million. That they've walked that path before you. So now you know what you're looking for in a coach or a mentor. We still may have to get all this stuff approved internally. Remember I said at the beginning, sometimes you have to persuade your CEO. So how are we going to get the cost approved? After all, this can be anywhere between £5,000, £10,000 a year, sometimes more. So I'm just going to put on here a quote from Ivan, who's the CEO of Ametria. His view was, we will spend the equivalent of an additional C-level person. An additional C-level person, what's that? 150, 200, 300 grand to coach our current C-level team. And we believe when structured well, this is an essential investment. In other words, we're happy to devote a significant amount a year specifically to coaching that team. And we believe that the generous budget allocation gives us an extra 10%, I don't know, from our individuals when we give them that opportunity. So at Ametria, Ivan's business, this was done right from the very start of Series A. So don't think for one moment that your business is too small. If I look personally across the 18 people I'm coaching right now, 7 are from businesses who haven't yet raised their B round. And of those, 3, I think, have not yet raised their Series A. So you might not be able to coach the entire team early on, but there's no reason why you can't coach some. So now let's quickly turn to measurement. So let's imagine that you join a business today and they've got $2.5 million of ARR. And over the coming 2 years, you move them from $2.5 million to $10 million of ARR. So you took them from a valuation of around 10 mil to around about $100 million. In other words, you added, not just you, but mostly because of you, if you're a revenue leader, you added $90 million of value. So if you're the CEO or the founder of a company or the CFO and you're wondering, do the unit economics stack up? There's your answer. Let's imagine that I'm going to pay you $300,000 to do this job. So what's 300K as a proportion of 90 million? It's not even 0.5%. It's what, 0.3% if my late afternoon maths is any good. So the additional cost of spending on a coach to give you the optimal chance to succeed versus the chance of failing. Like, why would you take that risk when your competitors are already priming themselves for success by deploying coaches? In fact, the bigger the expert, as I showed you right at the beginning, the more likely they are to have a next level coach. Remember this guy? No one has put in the chat who this is. By the way, I didn't recognize him either, so I'm not surprised no one's put anything in the chat. This is Manuel Estiarte. And he has been Pep Guardiola's personal coach for the last 30 years. So if you're not a soccer fan, Guardiola is arguably the most successful soccer coach in the world. And he's the current coach of Manchester City, who are the Premier League champions. And yet you almost certainly don't know about this guy. There's a great quote from Pep Guardiola who says, when I'm going through a difficult phase, maybe even struggling with self-doubt, yes, he experiences self-doubt, he's there for me. He's the best in his field, an unerring instinct for what is happening. And I value his loyalty, expertise, and honesty. What a quote. 30 years with one coach. So finally, I'm going to need to wrap up in just 1 second. So how can you figure out, James, don't worry, I'll be about 1 minute. So how can you figure out if your coach or mentor is having the kind of impact you need? And there are 3 things to look at here. Can I do less but achieve more? Am I making better decisions? Am I scoring more highly? I'm going to quickly run through those. If you can do less, then you are winning. Most SaaS executives I speak to are overworked and they haven't got their priorities in the right order. Decreasing your workload is essential to getting better results. Your coach should be able to help you do that. If you're making better decisions than you made without this person, you're making more considered choices. That's a pretty positive impact. And third, if you're scoring more highly, what I mean by that is, you get a quarterly review or an annual review from your CEO, and importantly from below, from your team, and you get a better result than you did last time. That sounds like a good result. And I stuck a number 4 in here as well. Do you look forward to the session you're about to have? With my own coach, it literally is my favorite hour of the working week. So if you're not looking forward to it, ask yourself, is this the right coach for me? So just those 4 things that we've covered. What is a coach or mentor? How do you choose one? How do you sell internally that it's a good idea? And then how do you look at the impact? So unless, James, there's any questions that came up, I think I covered everything that came up, then we're done. Sorry for running slightly over time. I hope that was useful for everyone.